The massive holographic display cast an eerie blue glow across the Galactic Council chambers as Admiral Vexstar stepped forward. His 6 arms gestured dramatically as he delivered news that would shake the foundations of known space. The Admiral's voice carried a mix of disbelief and finality that made every council member lean forward in their seats. "Honored delegates," Vexstar began, his translator crackling slightly. "I bring grave news from the Sol system. Earth's final transmission was received exactly 47 standard hours ago. Our long-range sensors detected a massive stellar cascade that appears to have consumed their entire system." The chamber erupted in whispers and concerned murmurs. Representatives from dozens of species exchanged glances, some genuine shock visible on their alien features. The Zelanian ambassador's crystalline form flickered with what could only be described as sadness, while the Corvin delegate's tentacles writhed nervously, but not all reactions were sympathetic. In the back rows, several representatives struggled. To hide their relief, the Dominion's envoy actually smiled, quickly covering it with a diplomatic cough. The truth was uncomfortable, but undeniable. Humanity had always been the unpredictable element in galactic politics. "Those humans," muttered the Dexian delegate to his neighbor, "always causing trouble with their death world mentality. Perhaps now the galaxy can find some peace." The humans had earned their reputation over the past century since first contact. While other species followed established protocols and ancient traditions, humans improvised. They took risks that made seasoned spacefarers nervous. They came from a world so hostile that most galactic species considered it uninhabitable, yet they thrived there. Even worse, they brought that survival instinct with them to the stars. Admiral Vexstar continued his report, displaying sensor readings and stellar charts. The cascade began in their star's core and spread outward. By the time we detected it, the entire system was already consumed. No escape pods were detected, no distress signals beyond the initial warning transmission. Deep beneath Earth's surface, millions of miles below the desolate wasteland that now covered the planet Commander, Kim Day watched these same proceedings through intercepted galactic communications. The human officer sat in what was arguably the most sophisticated command center ever constructed, buried so deep that the planet's core provided natural shielding from any detection attempts. Day smiled grimly as he observed the alien reactions. The carefully orchestrated deception was working perfectly. Above his head, automated systems maintained the illusion of a dead world. Radiation signatures, atmospheric readings, even gravitational anomalies. Everything had been calculated to sell the story of Earth's destruction. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Parkman from her station, "the surface monitors are showing optimal readings. The holographic projectors are maintaining the dead ocean effect, and the atmospheric scrubbers are keeping the right chemical signatures in the upper atmosphere." The scale of Project Cocoon was staggering. Entire underground cities sprawled beneath the Earth's crust, connected by transport tunnels that spanned continents. Massive fusion reactors carefully shielded to prevent energy signature leaks. Powered industrial complexes that worked around the clock. Hydroponic farms stretched for miles, feeding the hidden population while advanced recycling systems ensured nothing was wasted. Day turned to his communication console and opened a secure channel. "Control, this is Deep Station Alpha. Phase 1 appears to be complete. The galaxy has accepted our extinction." The response came immediately from President Lee Han, speaking from the primary command center located beneath what had once been the Korean Peninsula. "Excellent work, Commander. How are our friends upstairs reacting?" "Mixed responses, sir. Some genuine sadness from our traditional allies, but I'm detecting relief from several quarters. The Dominion delegation is practically celebrating." Han's voice carried a hint of dark amusement. "Good. Let them celebrate. It will make the next phase all the more effective." Through the command center's main display, Han could observe the incredible construction projects taking place in the underground cities. Massive shipyards carved from solid rock were producing vessels unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Research laboratories pushed the boundaries of physics, developing technologies that would have seemed impossible just years ago. The isolation had been planned for decades. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching threat from beyond the galactic rim, something ancient and terrible that had consumed civilizations before. Rather than flee or fight conventionally, humanity had chosen a third option: disappear completely and prepare in secret. "How long until the Devourers reach the outer systems?" Day asked. "Our deep space monitoring stations estimate 18 months. Han replied. "Plenty of time to complete our preparations." The president studied the production reports scrolling across his screens. Weapons that manipulated space-time itself, ships that could phase between dimensions, defensive systems that turned entire planets into fortresses. Humanity was no longer the scrappy underdog species fighting with primitive technology. Han keyed his communicator to address all command stations simultaneously. "All station commanders, this is President Han. Phase 1 of Project Cocoon is now officially complete. The galaxy believes we are extinct. They're about to learn the difference between being gone and being ready." Deep beneath the Earth, humanity worked in the darkness, preparing for the day they would remind the galaxy why Death World species should never be underestimated. Dr. Park Jimin's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the quantum detection array for the 100th time that day. The massive machine hummed with barely contained energy, its crystalline components glowing with an otherworldly light. 3 years had passed since Earth had vanished from galactic view. Every day brought new terrors from the deep space monitoring stations. The underground laboratory stretched 4 kilometers beneath the Korean peninsula, its walls lined with the most advanced sensors humanity had ever created. Banks of computers processed data from monitoring stations scattered across the galaxy's edge, each one disguised as space debris or dead satellites. The information they gathered painted a picture that would have sent any sane civilization fleeing to the furthest corners of known space. "Doctor," called her assistant, Lieutenant Uniseo, "the Proxima station is sending priority data. The readings are off the charts." Gimin wiped sweat from her forehead despite the laboratory's cool temperature. "Display the projection again. I need to see the full scope." The holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing a 3-dimensional map of local galactic space. But what appeared in the projection defied easy description. Geometric shapes moved through the void, each one massive beyond comprehension. They weren't ships in any traditional sense. They were structures that bent space around them, creating distortions that made accurate measurement nearly impossible. "Computer scale comparison," Gemin commanded. A small green dot appeared next to one of the geometric forms. The label read Earth's moon. The comparison was terrifying. Each of the approaching entities was easily the size of Luna, possibly larger. Worse, they moved with coordination that suggested intelligence, purpose, and unlimited patience. "They're not just random destroyers," Jimin whispered to herself. "They're systematic. Look at their approach vectors." The hologram showed the entities' path through space over the past 6 months. They had entered the galaxy at multiple points along the rim, then converged on populated systems with mathematical precision. Each target was chosen for maximum effect: trade routes, communication hubs, heavily populated worlds. Nothing was random about their advance. 2 levels below, General Choi-min stood in the war room studying intelligence reports that grew more disturbing by the hour. The walls were covered with star charts, tactical displays, and communication intercepts from across the galaxy. Red zones marked areas where contact had been lost. The pattern was spreading like a disease. "General," reported Major Kim Young, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "We've lost contact with the hegemony's forward bases in the Kepler sectors. That's 12 star systems gone dark in the past week." Choi-min studied the tactical display with the calm expression of a career military officer, but his eyes betrayed his concern. The Outer Rim colonies had been the first to fall. Frontier worlds that had seemed secure just months ago were now silent voids on the communication networks. The entities, whatever they were, consumed everything in their path. "What about evacuation efforts?" the general asked. "Sir, the few refugee ships that escaped report the same thing. These entities don't just destroy planets, they dismantle them. Strip mining on a scale we've never seen. They're harvesting raw materials, energy, even the basic elements that make up matter itself. In the archaeology section of the underground complex, Dr. Li Sujin sat surrounded by ancient artifacts and crumbling texts. She had spent the past 3 years translating fragments from dead civilizations. Searching for any reference to the approaching threat, what she had discovered chilled her to the bone. "The Devourers," she whispered, running her finger along. "Symbols carved into a stone tablet recovered from a world that had been dead for millions of years. They've returned." The tablet was one of dozens she had studied, each from a different extinct civilization scattered across the galaxy. The story they told was always the same: geometric entities arriving from beyond known space, consuming everything, then vanishing back into the void. The time gaps between their appearances suggested a cycle. Measured in geological ages, Sujin's research had revealed fragments of their last visit. Entire galactic civilizations had been reduced to archaeological remnants in a matter of decades. The few survivors who escaped to remote worlds had left warnings carved in stone and metal. Desperate messages for future generations who might face the same threat. Dr. called her research assistant. "The linguistic analysis program has finished processing the Antaran fragments. The translation confirms your theory." Screen displayed ancient text alongside its translation. "They consume not just matter, but the very foundations of space itself. When they feed, stars grow cold and planets crumble to dust. We tried to fight. We tried to hide. Nothing stopped them. If you read this, they've returned. Prepare for the end of all things." Above ground, Earth's surface remained a convincing display of desolation. Its automated weather systems generated toxic storms across the continents. Radiation scrubbers maintained the proper atmospheric signatures to fool any scanning attempts. Holographic projectors created the illusion of dead oceans and barren wastelands. But beneath the surface, humanity worked with desperate efficiency. Industrial complexes that had been under construction for 3 years were finally coming online. Shipyards carved from solid rock produced vessels that incorporated technologies reverse-engineered from ancient artifacts. Research laboratories pushed the boundaries of physics, developing weapons and defenses that would have seemed impossible before this isolation began. The irony was not lost on the human leadership. While the galaxy had celebrated Earth's apparent destruction, humanity had used that freedom to prepare for a threat that would soon consume everything the aliens held dear. The same species they had dismissed as primitive and unpredictable was now their only hope for survival if they were ready in time. The Galactic Council chambers had never seen chaos like this. Emergency klaxons wailed as delegates from across known space shouted over each other in dozens of languages. The massive holographic display showed a map of the galaxy painted in spreading zones of red, each marking a system that had gone silent in the past month. Ambassador Kale, of the Federation, stumbled to the central podium, his usually pristine uniform torn and stained. He had arrived on one of the last ships to escape the outer territories, and the terror in his eyes was visible to every delegate in the chamber. "Honored members," Kale's voice cracked as he spoke, "I bring word from the front lines. The hegemonies, 3rd Fleet 200 of their finest dreadnoughts, engaged the Devourers at Rigel Station yesterday. They lasted exactly 7 minutes before a complete signal loss." A ripple of horrified murmurs swept through the assembly. The Hegemony 3rd Fleet was legendary throughout the galaxy, commanded by Admiral Vexstar himself. If they had fallen so quickly, what hope did anyone else have? The Dominion representative, Ambassador Thex, raised his forearms for attention. "The situation is even worse than reported. Our entire Navy 800 vessels was deployed to the Kepler defense. Line 3 days ago, we received one transmission. They're not ships. They're something else entirely then. ... Nothing. Complete silence. The chamber erupted in panic. Species that had dominated galactic politics for millennia were reduced to frightened, refugees seeking any sanctuary they could find. The proud civilizations that had once looked down on primitive humanity now faced extinction at the hands of something far more ancient and terrible than themselves. "We need to evacuate the core worlds immediately," Kale pleaded, his voice rising above the chaos. "These Devourers are unstoppable. Our technology is useless against them. Our weapons barely scratch their hulls before they adapt and become immune. Deep beneath Earth's surface, Commander Songhai sat in the primary command center watching the galactic communications with an expression of grim satisfaction. The massive underground facility hummed with activity as thousands of human personnel monitored the unfolding catastrophe through intercepted transmissions and hidden sensor networks. Commander reported her aide, Sergeant Park Dong, "The intercepts are coming in faster than we can process them. The Anaran Collective just lost their homeworld. The Zelanian crystal cities are going dark one by one." Songhai studied the tactical displays with professional interest. The same alien species that had celebrated Earth's apparent destruction 3 years ago were now begging for help that would never come. The irony was not lost on her. Humanity had been dismissed as violent. Primitives from a death world, too unstable to be trusted with advanced technology. Now, those same aliens faced annihilation, while the extinct humans prepared their response. "What's the current status of the Devourer advance?" she asked. Lieutenant Yute looked up from his sensor station, his face pale. "Sir, long-range scouts. Report the main swarm has reached the Terra sector. They're systematically consuming everything in their path. At current speed, they'll reach the former Sol system in approximately 72 hours." The timing was perfect. 3 years of careful preparation, of maintaining the illusion of extinction while building the most advanced military force in galactic history, was about to pay off. The Devourers had cleared away most of the galaxy's established powers, leaving humanity free to act without interference in the deepest levels of the complex. President An Jae-soon stood before the assembled military leadership. The war room was a marvel of human engineering, its walls lined with displays showing real-time data from across the galaxy. Fleet commanders, research directors, and strategic planners filled the chamber, the best and brightest of humanity, gathered for the moment they had prepared for since Project Cocoon began. "Ladies and gentlemen," President An began, his voice carrying the weight of history, "for 3 years we have hidden in the darkness while our galaxy burned. We have watched civilizations that dismissed us as primitive barbarians beg for salvation that their own technology cannot provide." The assembled officers listened in absolute silence. Many had worked their entire careers toward this moment, the chance to prove that humanity's apparent weaknesses were actually their greatest strengths. "The Devourers are not invincible," An continued. "Our research teams have analyzed every fragment of data from the ancient civilizations. These entities are powerful, but they follow patterns. They have weaknesses. Most importantly, they have never faced a species that spent 3 years preparing specifically to kill them." Admiral Kim Sang-ho, commander of the Hidden Fleet, stepped forward. "Sir, all vessels report ready status. The new weapon systems have passed final testing. The dimensional phase drives are online. We have advantages the Devourers have never encountered before." President An nodded slowly, then turned to address the communication station. "Signal all surface installations. Begin powering down the stealth fields. It's time to show the galaxy that reports of humanity's death were greatly exaggerated. Across Earth's surface, massive energy barriers that had hidden the planet for 3 years began to fade. Underground installations started extending sensor arrays and weapon platforms through the planet's crust. The desolate wasteland that had fooled the galaxy for years revealed itself to be an elaborate disguise, concealing the most fortified world in known space. "Sir," reported the sensor operator, "Devourer scouts are detecting our energy signatures. They're altering course toward Earth." President An smiled grimly. "Good, let them come. It's time to remind the galaxy what happens when you count humans out too early." The Devourer swarm approached the Sol system like a tide of geometric death, their massive forms blotting out the stars behind them. For millions of years, they had followed the same pattern: arrive at a system, consume everything of value, then move on to the next target. The advanced scouts had detected the energy signatures of a recently awakened civilization. Probably scavengers picking through the ruins of the dead human world, Captain. Lim Young stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the approaching enemy through sensors that could peer across dimensional barriers. The flagship hung in space near Earth's orbit, completely invisible to conventional detection methods. Round him, his crew worked with the quiet efficiency of professionals who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Contact bearing. 27 Mark IV, reported his sensor officer, Lieutenant Cho Min. Lead elements are entering the outer system. One count 47 major constructs, each approximately 12 kilometers in diameter. Lim nodded calmly. The Devourers were exactly as the ancient records had described them, geometric shapes that defied easy categorization. Part machine and part something else entirely. They moved through space by bending reality around themselves, creating distortion. Fields that made nearby stars flicker and dim. Signal Prometheus Command, Lim ordered. Tell them the guests have arrived. Deep within Earth's crust, Admiral Kim Woo-jin received the message in the primary fleet command center. Around him, hundreds of officers monitored displays showing the positions of ships scattered throughout the solar system. The human fleet had been building for 3 years, hidden in quantum stealth fields that made them effectively invisible to any scanning technology the galaxy had ever developed. All units, this is Prometheus Command. Admiral Kim's voice carried across secure channels to thousands of vessels. Stealth protocols are now terminated. All ships decloak and assume attack positions. What happened next would have been impossible to believe if it hadn't been recorded by dozens of different sensor systems. The space around Earth suddenly filled with ships, not hundreds, but thousands of them. Sleek vessels that seemed to shift and blur as they moved, their hulls incorporating technologies that bent light and gravity to their will. The human fleet that materialized was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These weren't the crude, chemical rockets and primitive fusion drives that humanity had possessed during first contact. These were vessels that incorporated lessons learned from studying ancient artifacts. Powered by engines that drew energy from parallel dimensions and armed with weapons that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules, Captain Lim felt a surge of pride as the Indomitable fully materialized alongside her sister ships. The flagship was over 2 kilometers long, her hull studded with weapon systems that could fire coherent streams of altered spacetime. Her engines drew power from quantum vacuum fluctuations, giving her effectively unlimited range and endurance. Captain, reported his weapons officer, all systems show green. The dimensional phase cannons are charged and ready. The Devourers paused in their advance, their ancient sensors trying to process what they were seeing. For eons, they had encountered primitive civilizations that fought with crude energy weapons and simple projectiles. They had faced advanced species with sophisticated technology that still operated within conventional physics. But they had never encountered anything like this. Enemy vessels are attempting to scan us, Lieutenant Cho reported. Their sensor beams are being redirected by our reality anchors. They are getting confused readings. Admiral Kim's voice crackled. Over the communication system, all units, weapons free. Remember, these things have been terrorizing the galaxy for millions of years. Show them what 3 years of human ingenuity can accomplish. The battle that followed rewrote every tactical manual in human history. The first salvo from the human fleet consisted of weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, striking targets through folded space-time. Devourer constructs that had survived direct hits from stellar-level weapons found there. Hulls simply ceasing to exist as human reality warping technology erased them from local space. But the Devourers were not helpless. They responded with energy. Beams that could crack moons, and gravitational weapons that crushed entire fleets. Their adaptive technology began analyzing the human attacks, seeking ways to defend against these impossible weapons. Captain Lim watched as one of his escort vessels, the Defiant, took a direct hit from a Devourer's main weapon. The ship's hull began to buckle under gravitational forces that could have flattened a city. But instead of breaking apart, the Defiant simply phased through dimensions, reappearing behind the enemy construct to deliver a point-blank salvo from her quantum torpedoes. Sir called his tactical officer. The enemy is adapting faster than projected. They're starting to develop countermeasures. Then we adapt faster, Lim replied grimly. All ships, implement Combat Protocol 7. Let's see how they handle weapons that change their operating principles every few seconds. The human vessels began employing tactics that treated space-time itself as a battlefield. Ships phased in and out of parallel dimensions, fired weapons that rewrote local physics and used the Devourer's own gravitational distortions against them. What had started as a conventional space battle became something that resembled a war between gods. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourers found themselves facing an enemy that was not only prepared for their arrival, but had specifically designed every weapon and tactic to kill them. The ancient constructs, programmed with the accumulated combat data of countless civilizations, began to do something they had not done in eons. They started to retreat. Fleet. Admiral Park Kyung-ho watched through the reinforced viewing ports of the Retribution as the final Devourer construct writhed in its death throes. The ancient machine, which had terrorized civilizations for millions of years, was collapsing into itself as human quantum disruptors tore apart its fundamental structure. At the subatomic level, "Beautiful, isn't it?" commented Captain Lee So-young, the ship's commander. 3 million years of evolution, and it dies like any other machine when you know which buttons to push. The Retribution hung in the void of Sector 7, the last known hiding place of the Devourer remnants. Around the flagship, dozens of other human vessels maintained position, their sensors sweeping through multiple dimensions to ensure no trace of the ancient threat remained. The war had evolved far beyond simple survival. Humanity was now conducting a systematic extermination campaign across space and time itself. Admiral reported the sensor officer, "Quantum resonance is dropping to 0. The construct is completely destabilized. Estimate 15 seconds until final collapse." Park Kyung-ho nodded grimly. The Devourers had proven to be formidable opponents. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had given humanity 3 years to prepare. Those years had been spent not just building weapons, but studying every scrap of information about the ancient machines. Human scientists had learned to think like the Devourers, to predict their tactics, and ultimately to exploit their weaknesses. The viewing port flared with brilliant light as the Devourer construct imploded, its massive form crushing down into a point of superdense matter before vanishing entirely. Where moments before had hung a moon-sized killing machine, now there was only empty space and slowly dispersing quantum foam. Prometheus Command. This is Admiral Park Kyung-ho. He spoke into his communication device. Sector 7 is officially clear. No survivors detected. The last confirmed Devourer construct has been eliminated. The response came from Commander Shin Ari, speaking from the dimensional tracking station buried deep beneath Earth's surface. "Copy that, Admiral. Outstanding work. Long-range sensors are showing no remaining Devourer signatures in this reality. Lair, we're also scanning parallel dimensions, all clear on levels 2 through 7. Park Kyung-ho allowed himself a small smile. The dimensional tracking station was one of humanity's greatest achievements, a facility that could monitor threats across multiple layers of reality simultaneously. The Devourers had been clever, hiding fragments of themselves in pocket dimensions and parallel timelines, but human persistence had tracked down every last trace. "What about the deep dimensional scans?" he asked. "Negative contacts on all levels. Sir, if any Devourers remain, they're so deep in alternate reality that they can't affect our universe. For practical purposes, the threat is eliminated." The victory was complete, but Park Kyung-ho felt no celebration. The war had changed humanity in ways that would take generations to fully understand. They had become something new, a species that could hunt across dimensions, deploy weapons that rewrote the laws of physics, and systematically eliminate threats that had existed since the dawn of time. Across the galaxy, the aftermath of humanity's return was creating chaos of a different kind. The galactic communications networks buzzed with desperate messages from species that had spent 3 years believing humans were extinct. Now faced with the reality of humanity's power, they were scrambling to avoid becoming the next target. In the communications center of the Retribution, Lieutenant Nam Hee monitored the incoming transmissions with growing amazement. "Sir, we're receiving surrender offers from the Hegemony Council. They're offering to make Earth the new capital of their empire. The Dominion is even more desperate, added Corporal Yunte from another station. They're offering to transfer their entire military to human command. Complete technological integration, shared resources, anything we want. Park Kung-ho shook his head. 3 years ago, these same species had looked down on humanity as primitive barbarians from a violent death world. They had barely tolerated human presence in galactic affairs, treating Earth's representatives as curiosities rather than equals. Now they begged for protection from the very species they had dismissed. Admiral called the communications officer. We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. President Jang In-ho is preparing to address the galaxy. The main display activated, showing the surface of Earth as it truly was, not the barren wasteland the galaxy had seen for 3 years, but a thriving world bristling with defensive installations and industrial complexes. President Jang stood in the center of the restored Korean capital, its skyline dominated by towers that seemed to bend light around themselves. Citizens of the galaxy, Jang began, his voice carrying across every communication channel in known space. For 3 years, you believed humanity was extinct. You celebrated our passing. You divided our territory and planned to scavenge our technology. Some of you even expressed relief that the unpredictable humans were finally gone. The president paused, allowing his words to sink in across dozens of worlds where alien leaders watched in growing terror. We were never gone. We were simply getting ready. While you cowered behind your fleets and your ancient traditions, we prepared for a threat you couldn't even imagine. We studied, we built, we became something new, something capable of protecting this galaxy from enemies you never knew existed. Jang's expression hardened. The Devourers are extinct. Every fragment, every trace, every dimensional echo has been eliminated. The galaxy is safe for now. But understand this clearly. Humanity has returned, and we are not the same species that disappeared 3 years ago. The question now is not whether you can accept our presence, but whether you can accept what we have become. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. Humanity had returned, and nothing would ever be the same.